That's what we decided as a family," Ben said in a tone that suggested he wasn't joking. "Whoever you are, get out of the house, old lady. We're gonna work together as a family, so please leave soon. There's no room for you." As my son and his wife said this, mocking me, they gestured as if to shoo me away. Even I reached my boiling point in anger. Yet, I managed to calm down and, facing the three of them, I chuckled. It's silly to stand on the same stage as these people, to get provoked and angry. After all, I've been paying $6,000 a month for living expenses, and they've forgotten that and are trying to kick me out. What are they planning to do from now on? Fine. I'll divorce you too. I'll leave as you've said. At my words, the three of them grinned with disgusting smiles. I turned around, left the living room, and secluded myself in my room. Your belongings are trash. Take everything with you, Ben yelled from the living room. Without responding, I silently began packing my things. My name is Sarah. I'm 65 years old. I married Ben and worked part-time, but now I take care of house duties, also work from home. I met Ben through what you might call a pickup. I was a college student at the time. Ben, who was 7 years my senior and a working adult, approached me, having fallen in love at first sight. Having no experience with men, I was wary and kept avoiding Ben. But Ben didn't give up and kept talking to me whenever we met. It was often just a greeting, but we'd chat if there was time. I reluctantly listened, but eventually, he realized I wasn't interested and said, I didn't mean to bother you. I'm sorry for making you feel uncomfortable. With that, I realized Ben's sincerity and decided to face him. Gradually, I began to be drawn to Ben as well. After we graduated from college, we got married and were blessed with a daughter, Natalie, and a son, Mark. Ben, who loved children, was cooperative in raising our 2 kids, and we lived happily as a family. However, that happiness didn't last long. When Mark entered middle school, I heard something unbelievable while I was working part-time. It was Rachel, a senior colleague who was a year older than me, who told me. She was close in age, had kids, and was easygoing and caring, so I felt a sense of closeness and liked her. One day, as we were heading home at the same time, she said, You know, I was once picked up at the station a long time ago. That was the station where I met Ben. It was a coincidence that it was a pickup spot, I thought as I listened. Rachel continued. My friends were also picked up by the same guy. It became a topic among us, and after observing for a while, it turned out he was hitting on various girls. What? There's someone like that? Yeah, it's surprising. And he was only hitting on girls much younger than himself. Rachel laughed, and I laughed along. Rumor has it, he finally caught a young girlfriend and got married. At that moment, I had a bad feeling. And somehow, I felt embarrassed about meeting Ben here. But Ben fell in love with me at first sight and just happened to meet me here. I wanted to believe he was different from those pickup guys. But my hope was shattered. Moreover, he's been telling everyone he fell in love at first sight. Those who were deceived into marriage, poor things. Rachel continued to speak. But nothing reached me after I sensed that the pickup guy was Ben. I was ashamed of being deceived by Ben's words. Of course, I knew Rachel meant no harm. She didn't know my husband was Ben. Sarah? You look pale. Rachel asked me worriedly as I remained silent. Yeah, I'm fine. Just thinking about what to make for dinner tonight. It's tough every day, isn't it? I wonder what I should make too. I managed to change the subject with that. But my mind was full of what I had heard, and I made mistake after mistake at my part-time job in the afternoon. And that day, after dinner was over and the kids had gone to bed, I said to Ben, Today, you know, I heard something interesting from a friend at work. Interesting? What kind of story? Ben listened to my story. Surely, such a kind husband couldn't have been the worst kind of pickup artist. It must be some mistake. It'll probably turn into a funny story. That's what I thought, but wanting to be reassured, I opened my mouth. You know the station where we met, right? Apparently, there was this guy there who fell in love at first sight with younger girls and was hitting on them. Oh. And, apparently, he even married one of the girls he picked up there. I laughed after saying that, but Ben didn't laugh. Just wanting to be reassured, I, feeling increasingly crushed by anxiety, trembled as I said, "It's just a coincidence, right? You fell in love with me at first sight, right?" My voice trembled more than I thought it would. Then, Ben suddenly burst out laughing as if he found it funny. Relieved for a moment, he laughed in front of me, trembling me, "Love at first sight?" As if you were just the one who fell for it. Really, that coworker of yours shouldn't have said unnecessary things. You would have been happier not knowing. That's terrible. So, you're saying you tricked me into marrying you? Was your love for me a lie? I raised my voice, unable to help it, as Ben continued to laugh as if it was funny. But Ben, uncaring of my feelings, added another cutting remark. "It's your fault for being deceived. I wanted a young, stupid woman who would fall for a pickup, that's why I chose you." That remark was evidence that Ben was fully aware he had deceived me. Well, someone like you would have ended up with some terrible guy eventually. You should be glad you ended up with me. I've got work tomorrow, so I'm going to bed. And with that, he really laid down in bed. I think I was stupid too, but it was shocking to receive no support whatsoever. I had thought I was loved, but to realize it was all the same to him was unbearably frustrating. When we went to introduce ourselves for marriage, my in-laws said, "We're relieved he's finally marrying. And such a young girl too. We're delighted." I thought I was being praised, but probably Ben had been repeatedly told by his parents to get married. But now, knowing this truth, there's nothing I can do about it. Honestly, I no longer feel love, but it's not like our marriage is bad right now, and with our children at such a sensitive age, even if I wanted to divorce, I couldn't go through with it. The fact that I was mistaken about being loved and got married was sad and difficult, but I told myself I had to endure it. Yet, over time, I was able to come to terms with the past as the past, and even if there's no love for Ben, there's affection for the family life we've lived. After knowing the truth, our marriage couldn't be said to be good, and Ben started avoiding me on his days off, going to play pachinko. Yet, I no longer thought about wanting a divorce, and after quitting my part-time job, I started working from home, busily living each day. The kids grew up in no time, and both found jobs in our hometown after graduating from college. Natalie later married someone from the same company. She had a child and now lives far away, not able to see them often, but they're living happily as a family. The problem was Mark. After graduating from college, he quit his job soon after. That company wasn't for me. The crappy boss kept dumping work on me. The part-timers are useless, just babbling away. He kept complaining, so at first, I simply thought it was a bad fit with the company or the boss. That's tough. Surely, you'll find a company that suits you, Mark. I even supported his job changes. Thanks to that, Mark changed jobs, but quit again soon after. It was a repeating cycle. I lost track of how many times he changed jobs before turning 30. I wanted to defend my child, but him quitting jobs so quickly, it seemed like Mark was just being selfish. Full-time employment isn't for me. It's too much responsibility, and the pay is low. I'm fine with part-time jobs. If a customer or the head office pisses me off, I can quit right away. Eventually, Mark, having resigned himself to this, is now hopping from one part-time job to another. Of course, that's not enough to cover his living expenses. He lives at home, not contributing to food or utility bills, and seems to use all his earnings as pocket money for himself. Mark, you're over 30. You can't live like this forever. I've tried to reason with him several times. Even if not a full-time job, at least a part-time one. No, even if it's just odd jobs, you won't see a raise if you don't stick with one place. Patience is important. But no matter how much I worry, it's like talking to a brick wall. As for Ben, he'd say, "Well, don't say that. He's our son. We have no choice but to support him. Maybe that's fine for now. But doesn't he worry about our child's future? Dad really understands, huh? Mark, spoiled by Ben, seems to have no intention of stopping his odd jobs lifestyle. Then, at 34, Mark suddenly announced he was moving out. Apparently planning to get married. And it seems he's found a full-time job. Actually, she's pregnant. So, I've got to do my best. Mark told us this. And I was very happy. Not just for Mark's independence, but also the relief that my worried son was getting married and the joy of having a grandchild. Mark's partner turned out to be Karen, 7 years his junior. Since Ben and I also have a 7-year age gap, Mark laughed, saying it's in the blood. So, Karen came to visit our home. Nice to meet you. She brought a cake from a shop Ben likes, perhaps Mark told her, and her appearance was clean, making a good first impression. Karen, we're looking forward to having you. I greeted her with a smile, and Karen smiled back. But it wasn't a smile. I felt an odd sense of mockery in her smile and tilted my head in confusion. Huh? Oh. Sorry. I just remembered that love at first sight story. Love at first sight? Contrary to my confusion, Ben and Mark started laughing uproariously. Yeah, the story of how Mom got tricked. Really, Mark? You already told her? I was going to. It was about how Ben and I met. I didn't even know Mark knew, let alone that he'd told Karen. I was so embarrassed I could feel my face burning, but at the same time, a sense of loathing for the three of them welled up inside me. Karen laughed again triumphantly, as if she had one, and turned to me. I'm loved by Mark, so no worries there. Is that something you say to someone who is going to be your mother-in-law, even if it's our first meeting? No, maybe she said it to assert dominance because I'm going to be her mother-in-law. Karen, you're funny. And beautiful, too. You must be popular, right? If Dad has a daughter-in-law like Karen, he can rest easy. Then that's great. I'll do my best to be a wonderful wife. The three of them started chatting happily, leaving me out in the cold. But I didn't miss Karen looking down on me with a snicker. With Ben and Mark on her side, she acted as if she was superior to me. Karen was all surface, a collection of the worst traits of women. And so, Mark and Karen got married and started living together in an apartment not too far from our house. Despite her being such a person, if Mark is happy, that's all that matters to me. They eventually had a beautiful baby girl. A healthy girl. I thought, now Mark really has to do his best, when an incident occurred. It happened one day when I returned from shopping for dinner. I heard a baby crying inside the house. Thinking Mark's family had come over, I hurried inside. As expected, Mark, Karen, and my granddaughter were there. Oh, you're here? You should have let me know. Happy, I put down my bags and rushed to my granddaughter. Then Karen said to me in a chilly voice, "Who are you?" What? I was stunned by her words. I couldn't understand what was happening. Mark laughed heartily at her words. Amidst this, Ben said seriously, "Starting today, my son, his wife, and their kids will live with me. We don't need anyone else. That's what we decided in the family." What? From Ben's tone, it didn't seem like a joke. I don't know who you are, but old lady, get out of the house. We're gonna work together as a family from now on, so please leave soon. We don't have room for you. My son and his wife dismissively said this while making gestures as if shooing me away with their hands. It was a misunderstanding to begin with, getting married and all. At Ben's comment, the three of them burst into laughter again, pushing my anger to its boiling point. I should not be ridiculed to this extent, no matter what. However, facing the three of them, I too let out a laugh. Finding it foolish to stand on the same stage, be provoked, and get angry with such people. After all, I'm paying $6,000 in living expenses, and they forget that and decide to kick me out. What are they planning to do going forward? Fine. I'll divorce you too. I'll leave as you've asked. In my words, the three of them smirked with an unpleasant smile. I turned away and left the living room, retreating to my own room. Your personal belongings are trash. Take them all with you, Ben yelled from the living room. Without responding, I silently started packing my belongings. The next day, I called the moving company. Given it was a weekday during the off-peak season, they said they could move my stuff that evening. Please, as soon as possible. I quickly responded, and it was decided that I would move out that day. I couldn't wait to leave this house. That was my sole focus. Watching me busily prepare to leave, Ben said with a laugh. A jobless old lady, where exactly do you plan on going? I might have forgiven you if you had apologized. I completely ignored his words. I didn't understand why I should apologize when there was no reason for me to. I'll be in the way of the move, so I might as well go to the casino, said Ben, having been continuously ignored by me, and left the house in the afternoon. Though I thought it would have been nice to hear even a single word of thanks, expecting anything from him was foolish. Well, goodbye then, I said, watching Ben's back as he left the house. A few hours later. Thanks to the moving company, all my belongings were transported. I contacted the real estate agent to bring the keys immediately, moved everything in, and the move was complete. There's still a bit of unpacking to do, but I was relieved to have successfully moved. Now, all that's left is to proceed with the divorce, and I will be officially free. Lying on the sofa in a liberated mood, my phone rang. It was Ben. Hello? As I answered the phone, Ben yelled furiously from the other end. What do you mean by this? What are you thinking? His sudden loud voice made me instinctively pull the phone away from my ear. After a pause, I said, What? Why are you so angry? Don't play dumb. What kind of spite is this? You took all the furniture and appliances. The house is empty. I was puzzled by his words and slowly looked around the room. The furniture and appliances I brought from the house were all here. But there was nothing strange about that. What's wrong with that? You said not to leave my belongings behind. What? In other words, personal belongings. You thought they were yours? I chose and bought them with my money. I laughed heartily. Ben on the other end of the phone couldn't say anything and let out a choked sound. Mark and Karen were there, so you got carried away and said such things about kicking me out, but you weren't seeing the reality. Well, I'll give you the appliances then, Ben said desperately, but I didn't miss his words. Give me? They were mine to begin with. Don't get ahead of yourself. Ben fell silent again at my scolding. I could almost see his demeanor and nearly burst into laughter. Shut up. Anyway, this cuts all ties between us. Don't ever contact me again. And with that, he hung up the phone. It was funny that Ben, who had called me, forgot that he was the one who initiated the call after being outwitted by me. I couldn't stop laughing alone in my new house. Though I didn't take his "don't contact me again" seriously, I still needed to get him to fill out the divorce papers, so I planned to contact him again. Annoying as it was, I intended to go back to the house the next day. As I left the office with a heavy heart, someone called out to me, stopping me in my tracks. Sarah! I knew it was you, wasn't it? Rachel? It was Rachel, with whom I had gotten along well when I was working part-time. Though I knew her contact information, we had only met a few times since I quit, and I hadn't seen her at all in recent years. But a reunion after so many years was a happy occasion. We decided to have coffee and went into a nearby cafe. After catching up on old times, Rachel said, "Did you have some business there?" I told her everything in response to her question. I shared that I was the one who had married the pickup artist Rachel had told me about, and how my husband, son, and his wife had kicked me out of the house. While I laughed as I told the story, Rachel felt down on my behalf. That's how it was. I'm sorry for saying too much. Rachel looked apologetic, but I was actually grateful. Indeed, it was a shock when I found out, and I was too embarrassed and ashamed to talk about it back then. But now, I think it was good that I knew. I could have ended my life being ridiculed. My feelings about this are genuine. There were times I thought I would have been happier not knowing, but that's only if Ben had been capable of reflecting on his past. Given Ben's character, if I had remained ignorant, I would have been ridiculed even more. I'm able to take action now, while I still have the energy, thanks to discovering Ben's true nature back then. By the way, Rachel, did you have some business here too? At my question, Rachel started speaking after a moment's thought. Actually, it's about my son. Your son? I thought you had a daughter. After I quit my job, I had another child. I came here for a legal consultation about him. It turned out she was having trouble with her son's partner. Thinking that every family has its issues, we talked about various topics and then parted ways. When I returned home, my son's family was there. Apparently moving in their stuff. Hey, you crazy old lady. Taking all the furniture and appliances, what's wrong with you? They really seemed intent on living together. The two glared at me as they came in. Where the large fridge used to be, there was now a small fridge that they must have used in their apartment. Its diminutive size made me burst into laughter inadvertently. What's so funny? Nothing. Karen seemed to understand why I laughed and snapped at me angrily. I elegantly dodged her attack and turned to Mark. Where's Dad? In the bedroom. The baby's sleeping, so don't make any noise. According to Mark, Ben seemed to be babysitting the granddaughter. He did take good care of the kids when they were young. Back when I still felt happy. With that memory in mind, I headed to the bedroom. I brought the divorce papers. Just fill them out and leave them. As soon as I entered the bedroom, I said that. Ben glanced at me and clicked his tongue, standing up quietly. He was in the middle of cutting the baby's nails, having laid her down on the bed. My relaxing time ruined by this old hag. He muttered, complaining as he snatched the divorce papers from me. Ignoring Ben, I peered at my granddaughter's sleeping face. Though a child of my disappointing son, she was my blood-related granddaughter. There's no lie in saying she's adorable. But looking at her face with a smile, I felt a chill run down my spine. Her cute little face looked exactly like Rachel, whom I had just met. And then I remembered the story Rachel had shared earlier about her son's girlfriend getting pregnant, lying to scam money, and then disappearing. Just a few hours ago, I thought every family has its challenges upon hearing Rachel's confession. But could it be that Karen was the one who scammed money from Rachel's son? That's what crossed my mind. If my suspicion was correct, then this child might not even be Mark's. With a pale face contemplating this, Ben spoke to me. Here, I filled it out. Now get out. Okay. And throw this away too. Well, you won't be seeing this kid again anyway, but you can keep it if you want. Ben handed me a tissue wrapped around the baby's nail clippings along with the divorce papers. I took them without a word and left the house immediately. Then, I hurriedly contacted Rachel again. A month later, my phone rang once more. With Ben on the other end. Hey, I got a notice that the electricity and gas bills are unpaid. What's going on? Again, he raged one-sidedly, taking his anger out on me. I don't know. Pay it yourself. Where's the money? How are these bills paid before? Where's the bank card? I could hear him rummaging around. Probably turning the house upside down looking for the bank book. Seeing Ben in a frenzy, I couldn't help but laugh. What are you laughing at? Get over here. You've made a mess, so I can't find anything in the house. After saying that, Ben hung up the phone. Though I wasn't keen on it, there was something I needed to do. Reluctantly, I got ready and called someone. That night, I rang the house's doorbell. You're late. What have you been doing, you freeloader? Seeing my face on the monitor, Ben rushed out of the entrance and froze upon seeing the person next to me. Who might this be? She's a friend of mine. It's been a long time. Rachel greeted him deliberately. However, Ben tilted his head in confusion. You don't remember the face of every girl you've picked up, do you? Rachel laughed. I couldn't help but laugh along. Ben, feeling embarrassed, glared at me. What kind of harassment is this? Bringing a woman I hit on here, thinking I'd be upset? I wouldn't do something so childish. I'm here to see Karen, I replied. Together with Rachel, I entered the house. As expected, the living room was occupied by my son and his wife. They seemed quite relaxed in a home without me. Seeing my face, they made it clear with their expressions that they thought I was a nuisance, but frankly, I didn't want to come either. So, you must be Karen. Rachel began upon seeing Karen's face. Huh? Who are you? A friend of the old lady? Why are you bringing her here? She's a stranger. Karen retorted with disdain towards Rachel. Rachel looked incredulous but quickly responded. I've been looking for you. It was hard to find you since your last name changed. Hey, lady. What do you want with Karen? Mark stood up. Then Rachel handed Mark an envelope. Mark, puzzled, pulled out a document from inside. Tim Brown? Who's that? What's this? Genetic research? Mark read the name on the document within. Tim Brown. Rachel's son's name. Hearing that name, Karen's face turned pale, and she snatched the documents and envelope from Mark. What's this, Karen? You shouldn't look at someone else's mail. It's wrong. Her voice was clearly trembling. Karen likely knew who Rachel was and the content of that letter. We did a DNA test for my son and Karen's daughter. Huh? Your child is my son's child. Unfortunately, there's no blood relation with Mark. With Rachel's words, Mark turned pale and froze. Karen remained motionless, equally shocked. What do you mean? Ben, who had been silent, joined our conversation. I smiled broadly and said, I made good use of the granddaughter's nails you gave me. Yes, I had passed the granddaughter's nails Rachel gave me before to her. And I told her the granddaughter looked just like Rachel. It wasn't improbable for Karen, rude and deceitful, to scam someone for money. Rachel discreetly sent the nails I provided and her son's toothbrush to a laboratory for testing, which confirmed a parental relationship. However, Rachel hadn't yet informed her son, knowing he would be extremely worried about the baby supposedly born. She wanted to assess the situation herself first to prevent her son from being shocked. That's not my child? It must be some mistake. Mark was devastated. Pitiful, thinking you were loved and being tricked into marriage. Rachel said to Mark. The same words Karen had used on me. Being deceived into marriage by Ben and now hearing those words directed at Mark made me involuntarily smile. It wasn't my grandchild after all. Ben collapsed, shocked. The child will be taken care of by us. There will likely be a lawsuit, but... Wait! Not that, please! How will you raise her? You're getting divorced, right? And you don't work. Right. You also have to return the money. Karen clung to Rachel's arm, crying. I'm sorry. Please forgive me. Rachel spoke to Karen gently, trying to console her. You drove Sarah out and sneaked into this family with lies. Do you think you'll be forgiven? Though Rachel's tone was gentle, the coldness in her words left Karen unable to retort, only to wail in response. And what about the bank? Yeah. I turned back to Ben, who was in a daze, his eyes vacant. Before the granddaughter was born, Ben was overjoyed, calling her his inner grandchild, his hope for living. Now, that is gone. I can understand the shock. But I had to confront him with an even harsher reality. The bank is only with you. There are no others. What? How did we manage the living expenses until now? The utility bills? There must be an account for living expenses. I was the one providing for the living expenses. Every month, $6,000. Of course, I have no intention of doing that anymore. At my words, Mark also looked up. Ben's eyes darted around, unsettled. $6,000? Every month? Ben sounded surprised, as if he didn't know until now. Yes. Didn't you know? Well, you just spent it however you liked. Ben looked up at the sky, perhaps reflecting on his actions. Thinking he hadn't been caught. He had poured all the money he could freely use into gambling, and when that ran out, he secretly took from the food money. It wasn't once or twice that the money I set aside for payments disappeared. Thought you weren't caught? Your wasteful spending inflated our living expenses. In my words, Ben defiantly raised his voice. But there must have been a bank book with savings, like for bonuses, right? You took that years ago, all of it blown on gambling. Don't you remember? Confronted with the truth, Ben looked startled. Likely having forgotten. And he must have misunderstood that it still existed. I sighed in disbelief. I've been compensating for that with my own money without saying anything. Do you realize now how despicable you were to drive me out without knowing how much you depended on me? You better live with that regret. Liar! Where did a poor person like you get that kind of money? Ben yelled, refusing to accept the truth. It was pointless to argue. If you can't believe it, then fine. I then turned my gaze to Mark. And you, Mark. What? Mark, who had been disheartened by the situation with Karen and his daughter, looked at me with empty eyes. Hopping from job to job, never contributing to the household expenses. Living off my money and then driving me out. Have you ever thought about what happens next? Silence. You know Dad's savings are zero. He might be reemployed now, but considering his age, how long can he work? Mark seemed to grasp the gravity of the situation, trembling as if he had seen something terrifying. You might have thought returning home would save you living expenses like when you were single, but driving me out, you've made a huge mistake thinking life can go on as before. No one responded after that. Only Rachel patted my shoulder, satisfied. I felt fulfilled having said what I wanted and addressed her. Let's go home. Right. Karen, I'll be in touch. As Rachel and I were about to leave, Mark called out. Mom, where are you living now? Living alone must be tough, right? You can come back. His smile was forced. Calling me Mom for the first time in decades. Clearly trying to appease me. His ulterior motive was transparent, and I responded with a slight smirk. Not at all. I'm living in a high-rise condo now. It's more comfortable than here. A high-rise condo? Yes. Bought it for $2 million. Don't worry. If anything happens to me, I've arranged for everything to go to my daughter, so Mark won't be burdened. Hearing the amount, Mark and Ben exchanged looks. Then Ben stared at me, blinking and forgetting. A $2 million condo? Where did you get that kind of money? Are you really wealthy? Rachel tilted her head, puzzled. Didn't your family know you're a best-selling author? No. I never said that because they would just ridicule me. Turns out you got away the biggest one. We laughed together, and Ben and Mark suddenly changed their attitude, trying to stop me from leaving. Sarah, I was wrong. You've been doing such incredible work, and I never understood. I'm truly sorry. Please, come back. Their sudden change of heart was nauseating. Both began to plead in soft voices, clinging to me. To think you can live in such a house, Mom, you're amazing. Come back home. If that's impossible, could you at least help with the living expenses? Please. I was just deceived by that woman. It's sad, isn't it? Mark said, pointing to a disheartened Karen. Karen flinched, but it seems like she no longer had the energy to fight. Sitting next to her sleeping child without moving, I felt a bit sorry for her, but after all, it was her own doing, and I had no intention of helping. Yes, being deceived into marriage is pitiful. I returned my gaze to Mark and said that. Well then. That's why you have to figure it out yourself, right? It's your fault for being deceived. With those words, I pushed Ben and Mark away. They must have realized they were abandoned by me. Stunned, they slumped onto the sofa. See you then. I cheerfully bid goodbye and left the house. A family that had no interest in me. Even when I said I was paying, they wouldn't believe me and treated me as poor. Even when I said I was working from home, they ridiculed me, saying, "Working from home, really?" They probably didn't know I was a novelist, nor did they know about the royalties and real estate investments I made with that money. I couldn't care less about being praised for my work by such people now, nor did I want anything to do with them. Karen, who tricked me and got into the family with lies, and Ben and Mark, who kept belittling people, ended up losing their family, money, and hope. Maybe we were a family of similar kinds, I thought, laughing inwardly. Afterward, Karen and Mark divorced. Karen was kicked out but had nowhere to go, so she's apparently still living in the house temporarily. Ben and Mark, despite everything, couldn't bring themselves to throw out the small baby. Karen must be living there miserably. Mark eventually quit his job again. He thought he no longer had the duty to support a wife and child, but seems to have forgotten that he now has to support his father. In that moneyless house, I wonder how the two will survive. I hope they reflect on their actions and live their lives accordingly. Later, Rachel and her son Tim sued Karen. Rachel is gearing up for parenting from scratch. It's enviable to have something to strive for at this age, but it reminds me that I too must keep working. I open my laptop. Maybe for my next book, I'll write about a woman who was deceived into marriage but turns her life around and finds happiness. Watching the night view from my beautiful condo, that's what I thought. "I won't let anyone else in the car. Please come by foot," said my son's wife, chuckling as she twirled the car keys around her finger to show me. While organizing the situation in my head, I felt a sense of despair. How long would it take to get to my son and his wife's new home from here? Following my son's job transfer, they decided to move to the countryside, building a house in a modest residential area. Unfortunately, public transportation only goes so far, not reaching close to their new home. Smirking with delight, my son's wife quickly returned to where the others were, leaving me behind. With no other choice, I sighed and took out my smartphone to see how far I could get by bus. It seemed there was a bus from here that could shorten the walking distance. Gathering my spirits, I searched for the bus stop when someone tapped my shoulder, making me turn around. "Why?" I was surprised by the person behind me and couldn't find the words to continue. "My name is Susan. I'm 72 years old this year. Thanks to the environment I grew up in, I'm quite sturdy for my age. Right after graduating, I married into a family that ran a business, and I worked there as well. My job was to deliver goods over the mountain to a store, taking over for my husband, father-in-law, and mother-in-law who worked at the store or did deliveries by car. Even after having my first son, I continued doing this, carrying him on my back. My son is now grown up, married, and seems to be living happily. I still remember when he brought home his wife, wanting to marry her. Despite being nervous, I was surprised but agreed since he was so serious. However, it seems she doesn't like me much, going out of her way to bother me when my husband and son aren't looking. Maybe she's annoyed that my son, who is kind-hearted, pays too much attention not just to her but to us as well. Initially, I kept silent for the sake of my son's choice, but lately, her harassment has become unbearable. One Christmas, looking forward to my son and his wife's visit after a long time, I thought she wouldn't dare do anything with my husband and son around. But as soon as she arrived at our home, she asked to use the kitchen to show her gratitude with her cooking, so I accepted her offer. I was quite worried about her, then suddenly she caused a disaster with an exploding microwave. Upon hearing the sound, everyone rushed to the kitchen and we saw milk and ketchup all over the floor. The kitchen was a complete mess. Sitting on the floor, crying about wanting to help, she was consoled by my son and husband, who could only laugh it off. As my son tried to take her to the shower, she looked back at me and smirked. My husband, busy cleaning up, didn't see her malicious face. Realizing it was another of her harassments, I was furious but had to keep quiet and help clean silently. Months later, with my son's transfer looming, they decided to build a house, planning ahead. Originally working at the headquarters in New York, my son was assigned to a branch, prompting the move. The branch was in our hometown, and we considered living together. But his wife strictly opposed it, so they built their new home. There was a disagreement over the down payment for the new house, sparked by my son insisting on handling the finances themselves. Though grateful, I wondered where his stay-at-home wife would get such money. The next day, she called, asking for money for the new house, claiming I had plenty because I was frugal. When I objected, saying this wasn't what I was told, she retorted, "Well, I want to look good in front of Roy too. I've already told him I'd pay, so please give it to me as soon as possible." Though I wondered why I had to give money to my son's wife, I decided to stay silent and give it for my son's sake. However, after the house was built, I never received any thanks. As the fiscal year-end approached and my son's transfer was finalized, they invited us to see the new house. "We'll send the address to your smartphone. Bring a housewarming gift," she said before hanging up. Despite disliking her attitude, I was curious about the house I helped fund. My husband and I planned to visit next weekend. Upon arriving at the airport in their town, to my surprise, they came to pick us up. Initially, we were supposed to go directly to their house, but my son kindly offered a ride. After reuniting, we decided to grab lunch at a food court inside the station, enjoying a peaceful moment since it had been a while since we last met. With my husband and son around, his wife behaved, which relieved me. Before heading to their new home, I excused myself to use the restroom. But it was lunchtime, and everywhere was crowded. Finally, after using the restroom and washing my hands, someone suddenly spoke to me from behind. "Are you still here? Roy said to go look for you because you're taking so long," said my son's wife, glaring at me unpleasantly. Being scolded in front of so many people, I felt intimidated. Pleased with my reaction, my son's wife smirked. "Are you still using that dirty handkerchief? It's about time to throw it away," she scoffed, pointing at the jet dryer while laughing through her nose at the handkerchief I was holding. "Nobody carries a handkerchief around anymore. Don't you know about jet dryers? Poor thing," she said loudly enough for others to notice us, drawing disdainful looks from other users. Seeing me shrink even more, my son's wife got carried away and said, "I don't want to be associated with someone so poor. I'd rather pretend we're strangers. So, strangers don't get rides in the car. You can walk, Susan," chuckling as she twirled the car keys in front of me demonstratively. Realizing what this meant, I felt a mild sense of despair as I sorted through the situation in my head. How far would it be to my son and his wife's new home from here? Their new home was in a modest residential area far from here. Unfortunately, public transportation only goes so far, not reaching close to their new house. "Oh, I have the gift you were supposed to bring. I'll be taking it in advance, okay?" she said, distorting her mouth in amusement before quickly going back to the others, leaving me behind. Feeling slightly relieved after my son's wife left, I sighed and decided to take the bus as far as possible, taking out my smartphone to check. Luckily, there seemed to be a bus from here that could reduce the walking distance somewhat. Regaining my composure, I looked for the bus stop when someone tapped my shoulder, making me turn around. "Why?" Surprised by the person behind me, I couldn't find the words to continue. "There you are, I've been looking for you." Seeing my husband's face when I turned around eased the anxiety that had stiffened my heart. As we headed to the bus stop, I told him everything while he followed, puzzled yet listening. I told him about the harassment from my son's wife, the issue with the finances for the new house, and everything that happened today, sharing everything as we rode the bus together. Throughout, my husband listened silently, his frown deepening as the story progressed. After I finished, he simply said he'd walk with me and remained silent. Despite my insistence to turn back, he steadfastly refused. When the bus reached its final stop, everyone disembarked. Now, from here, the distance to my son and his wife's new home was significant, with no public transport available. Entering the destination into my map app, It showed it would take roughly over 3 hours to arrive. Let's go. Unsure of which direction to head, I stared at the map app, but my husband started walking without hesitation. Following him, I checked the map app to ensure we weren't going the wrong way. However, my husband had chosen the correct direction. A short while later, my phone rang. Seeing it was from my son's wife, I hesitated to answer, looking towards my husband for help. Noticing my gaze, he glanced at my phone, grimaced, took it, and pocketed it before continuing to walk. Realizing I had stopped, he looked back, silently took my hand, and we started walking again. Surprised by the suddenness, I had a lot to say, but it all flew out of my mind. My husband pulled me along silently, never hesitating. Despite the many forks in the road, he chose the path without any hesitation. And I followed silently, hearing my phone vibrate periodically. I finally pulled at my husband's hand and suggested, "It must be Kelly calling. Maybe you should answer it, it's annoying, isn't it?" Stopping, my husband turned to me and said, "Just ignore her. Are you tired?" Touched by his concern, I smiled and made a fist. "This is nothing compared to the deliveries I used to do. Are you tired?" "I'm fine. I'm sorry for all the trouble up to now." He muttered softly, clearly an apology to me. Following my husband as he started walking again, I laughed, forgetting the current situation. Pretending to talk to myself, I recounted everything to my husband as he walked ahead. I talked about helping with deliveries right after we got married, our son Roy being born, and when Roy brought home his wife, Kelly, saying he wanted to marry her. My husband walked on in silence, but he seemed to be listening. Suddenly stopping, he turned to me and said, "If we take the wider path, it'll be a longer, but smoother journey. The narrower path is a bit rougher but will get us there faster." "I'm taking the narrow path, what about you?" Touched by his concern, I grinned and quickened my pace to catch up to him. Then, overtaking him, I said, asking someone who's been crossing mountains for years? "Let's hurry up, Roy must be worried." Continuing together, we soon reached a quiet residential area, where a brand new house could be seen. Finally, we arrived at our destination. After getting my phone back from my husband, I saw a slew of missed calls from Kelly but chose to ignore them to check the time. Just as my husband had said, the journey that was supposed to take over 3 hours was shortened. Thinking of it as the last stretch, I braced myself and we finally reached Roy and Kelly's new home. Roy's car was parked in the garage. Pressing the doorbell, hurried footsteps approached from inside, and the door swung open. Roy, looking pale, welcomed us in first. We were led to the living room sofa to finally relax. Looking around the well-built house while massaging my tired feet, I felt proud. Roy then brought us cold drinks. "Mom, Dad, I was surprised to hear you walked here all of a sudden. Are you okay? You must be tired, why don't you stay the night?" Sitting across from us, Roy looked concerned, but my husband sharply replied, "No. We'll leave once we've calmed down. We don't want to stay in a house with such a terrible daughter-in-law." Hearing this, Roy's eyes widened as he looked for Kelly, who was nowhere to be seen. He hurried upstairs. After a bit of noise from upstairs, Kelly seemed to resign and came down with Roy. Sitting next to him, Kelly wouldn't meet our eyes. Roy asked about the meaning behind my husband's words. My husband, with a bitter face, yelled at Kelly, "All this time, you've been deceiving us. We thought you were a slightly clumsy but charming daughter-in-law, but it turns out you've been doing terrible things to my wife." Shaking, Kelly kept silent as my husband continued his tirade. Roy tried to intervene and stop my husband, but my husband wouldn't be stopped. "Even when building this house, we admired you for wanting to manage on your own, but to think you were extorting money from my wife." Roy stopped trying to intervene as my husband's words echoed through the room. I calmed my husband down, asking him to sit, and did the same with Roy. Addressing Kelly without looking at me, I laid bare my feelings. "Kelly, the money issue is fine. I wanted to help you build this house. But your entitled attitude was unacceptable. It made me angry. Kelly remained silent as I spoke. And Roy looked back and forth between us, confused. Do you know why I gave you the money even though I didn't have to? Kelly shook her head. It's because it would trouble Roy. He didn't want to burden us and planned to manage on his own. If I said the money came from me, wouldn't that make you feel guilty? So I said it was from you, not for your sake. My stern words finally made Kelly break down and cry. Satisfied that I had said my piece, I sat back down. Roy then asked, Mom, did you pay for half of this house? Yes. And Kelly made you do it? Yes. Roy, overwhelmed, turned to Kelly. What have you done? We agreed not to burden our parents, and now this. You said you had enough savings. My husband added. This terrible daughter-in-law has been harassing my wife in secret. The mess in the kitchen during Christmas and making us walk today was all on purpose. Kelly. Roy stood up, angrily denouncing Kelly. I'm sorry. I was just jealous because you were always looking after your mom and dad, and I felt left out. Kelly started begging for forgiveness. But my husband was unforgiving. Why target my wife then? I get attention from Roy too, so why am I left out? That's because... Probably because of my husband's stern look, despite his age. Kelly might have thought better than to argue back. My husband pressed on. What about the finances for this house? Why did you only tell my wife and not both of us? Even if you found it hard to tell me, don't you think it's rude to call someone trying to lend you money poor? Hearing this, Roy looked up sharply at Kelly. Kelly, biting her lip in silence, received a trembling confirmation from Roy. Kelly, you made my mom give you money and even said that? With no other option, Kelly nodded tearfully. While Roy collapsed on the sofa, overwhelmed by guilt for not knowing. Kelly, scorned by Roy and yelled at by my husband, kept apologizing. When my husband demanded the money back, Kelly shook her head. I don't have any savings, please forgive me. Then, she pulled a box from under the TV stand, showing us a bank book with barely a few dollars left. Seeing this, my husband urged Roy towards divorce. Exactly. After all the care my mom gave you, to call her a stranger. I'd rather be strangers with such a person. Kelly clung to Roy, wailing for him not to divorce her. After that, no one could handle Kelly, and Roy drove us to the station. Roy then went straight to the city hall to file for divorce. When discussing the divorce, Kelly's parents, who were decent people, called to apologize sincerely on her behalf and even provided compensation through Roy. It's baffling how such honorable parents ended up with a daughter like that. Kelly, of course, was kicked out of the new house and is now at her parents' house. Despite her pleas, Roy did not budge, and they are still discussing divorce. As for us, we're planning to move out of our old house and into the clean, emptied new home that once belonged to Kelly. Roy offered to live together since the mortgage is still outstanding, and it would be a shame to demolish the newly built house. Initially hesitant, my husband eventually agreed to Roy's persistence. Once settled in Roy's new home, we spent our days leisurely drinking coffee in the living room while he was at work. In this quiet residential area, all you could hear was the chirping of birds. During this peaceful time, I asked my husband how he knew the way so well. Why did you know the way so well? He said, I used to deliver around here back in the day. This place is like my backyard. Watching my proud husband, I couldn't help but laugh. It seems we're in for happy days ahead as a family of 3. Long time no see. Still childless? Guess you're just defective since you can't even show off a grandkid. Even though there's been a lot between Susan and me in the past, looking back, it still feels like my guts are boiling with anger. After all, the harassment for not being able to have children has been too much. I don't know how badly she wanted grandchildren, but blaming me 100% for not being able to have children is something I really wish she'd stop. To think there are people who would say something as awful as calling someone defective, in a way, it's almost impressive. I'm at the park right now. And I'm not alone. They're right over there. The look on Susan's face when I said that. The grandchild she must have been so desperately wanting to see was right there. But reality is cruel. She hasn't realized that what she's done will come back to her, how blissfully unaware she is. It's about time she realizes. I won't let her forget now. I'm Rachel, a 45-year-old housewife. I love children, which led me to earn a teaching license at university, and I worked as a teacher at a public elementary school. Being a teacher had its tough moments, but the joy of being involved in the children's growth made me feel like it was my true calling. I was devoted to my job, but one day, a childhood friend introduced me to someone. That was how I met Simon, my husband. Simon was 25 at the time. He had graduated from college and was working as a teacher at a middle school. He seemed to struggle with finding opportunities to meet people. Being busy with work at the middle school. He hadn't dated much, focused on his studies through college. He had talked to a friend about wanting to try dating, which led to the introduction. When I was introduced to Simon by my friend, I wasn't seeing anyone and was focused on my work. So, I wasn't too keen on the idea, but since my friend had gone through the trouble of setting it up, I thought I might as well meet him once. I remember that day clearly. We had arranged to meet at a cafe, but he was quite late. I thought to myself, if he doesn't show up in the next 30 minutes, I'll leave. Just then, I saw someone running into the cafe. I'm so sorry for making you wait. Simon arrived, out of breath, looking like he could barely stand. No, it's okay. I was just starting to worry, that's all. Actually, one of my students asked me for book recommendations. We got so caught up talking about it that I lost track of time. Hearing his response, I couldn't help but burst into laughter. At the same time, it was clear to me that he wasn't a bad person. Someone who could get that excited about books with a student must be well loved. And imagining Simon getting so involved in recommending books to a student that he forgot our meeting made him seem all the more endearing. I'm sorry for laughing so much when we've just met. I want to know more about you. Do you? Seeing your smile made me feel like my nerves just disappeared. You were nervous? Yes. Well, I didn't expect to meet such a wonderful woman. Simon said, somewhat shyly. Come on. I'm almost 35, you know? I'm probably quite a bit older than you. I'm 25 now, but age doesn't matter to me. From there, Simon and I got to know each other better. His passion for work, his kindness towards others, and most importantly, the respect he had from his students became very clear. It seemed Simon thought highly of me too. It hasn't been long since we met, but I'd regret it if I didn't say this now. Would you consider dating me with marriage in mind? Simon looked at me, his face turning red. I had already made up my mind. If it's with you, I think we can build a good relationship. Spending time with Simon was always enjoyable. Even outside of our dates, I found myself wanting to be with him more. Then, Simon proposed. Ever since I met you, Rachel, I've thought how nice it would be to be together forever. Will you marry me? Yes. I feel like I can be happy with you, Simon. I didn't hesitate with my answer. We met each other's parents and decided to get married, Simon and I. The idea of marrying the person I love and living together was something I couldn't have imagined a while ago. When getting married, we discussed our future work and the possibility of having children. One of the reasons I fell for Simon was because he genuinely respected my thoughts and life choices. I want to continue working even after we get married. Above all, I love my current job as a teacher. I've always felt that about you, Rachel. But what about kids? I'd like to have them if possible, but I want to respect your decision when it comes to actually having them. Of course, I want children too. It might be hard balancing work and family, but I hope we can start trying for a baby soon. Simon and I agreed to try for a baby within our capabilities while continuing our jobs. Such things are blessings, after all, and not entirely within our control. However, we were oblivious to the brewing storm in our peaceful life. I'm heading out for work. Got it. You'll be back by dinner, right? Take care. After seeing Simon off, I was having coffee alone in the living room when the doorbell rang. Hello, Rachel. Hello, Susan. Simon's at school for sport practice. What's up? Then, Susan, Simon's mother and thus my mother-in-law, seemed disappointed for a moment but quickly turned to face me and blurted out. It's almost a year since you got married, isn't it? Yes, thanks to you. That's not what I mean. Before taking care of other people's children, you should have your own. If you can't even manage that, you might as well quit your job. Susan looked at me with frustration, as if her message wasn't getting across. That's quite sudden to say. Isn't it about time? Or were you planning to wait until you're in a stable condition? Are you talking about having a baby? You are 35, right? It's normal to have 2 or 3 kids by now. The sudden inquiry about children took me aback. But this isn't something I can control at will, so I decided to be honest. Simon and I have talked about it, and we'll let you know as soon as there's good news. What are you talking about so carelessly? I can't understand how you can be so laid back about this. I was puzzled by her increasingly anxious demeanor, considering she seemed calm when we met before our marriage. I'm sorry if I make you feel something. But this isn't something I can manage on my own. So, what? Are you saying it's Simon's fault? As she said that, Susan stormed into the room. Then, from inside, I heard Susan's voice. What's this machine? I bumped my foot against it. I'm sorry. That's an air purifier. An air purifier? This big? I have a dust allergy, so I'm extra careful about air quality. I'm sensitive to house dust, and it can make me sneeze uncontrollably. It's also for keeping the air clean. Sorry if it's in the way. Susan let out a huge sigh. Huh? Are you saying you're coddling yourself? Coddling, you say? That's right. You're making your body weaker by fussing over dust and garbage. If you need fresh air, just open a window. Unfortunately, we live on the 2nd floor of an apartment in a busy area, where exhaust fumes are a concern. Well, but with the exhaust gas, we can't really open the windows much. Relying on such a nonsensical machine. That's why you can't have kids. Susan looked at me as if she was absolutely certain she was right. If you really want children, come to my house next week. Yeah, but... It's fine. My husband isn't around, and I'm the only one there, so it won't bother anyone. The thought of going there made me feel gloomy. Next week, I visited Susan's house. Come this way. Susan took my hand and led me into the living room. As soon as I entered, a strange scent hit my nose. Excuse me, but this smell. I was at a loss for words to describe the strange aroma when a cup that seemed to contain tea was presented to me. Here. This tea is supposed to be good for your health and make it easier to get pregnant. Am I supposed to drink this? What about you, Susan? I'm not drinking it. They say good medicine tastes bitter, so I'm being harsh for your own good. Susan declared, pushing a bag resembling paper into my purse as I struggled with the bizarre color and smell of the tea, which seemed undrinkable. What is this? Don't go through someone's bag like that. Don't talk to me like I'm a thief. This tea, if you drink 4 cups a day, it's supposed to be effective. And next, there's this. Susan continued, pulling me towards the yard where I saw a mountain of laundry. What's with all the laundry? I asked, puzzled by the sight of gauze towels, tiny clothes, and bibs that clearly weren't Susan's. A friend gave them to me. Touching and washing children's things supposedly makes pregnancy more likely. It's also good practice for when you have a child. She explained, bringing out a large tub as if it were the most natural thing in the world. Washing with all your heart is said to welcome a child into your womb. She added before leaving me alone with my disbelief. Simon and I indeed wanted children and discussed waiting without stress for the right time. Yet here was Susan, pushing bizarre practices on us. Frustrated but unable to leave without doing anything, I washed and hung the children's clothes as told. "Susan, I'm done." "Then come back the day after tomorrow and wash like you did today." "But I have work." "Work? You can find time before or after work if you really want children," she countered, pushing me to the limits of my patience. Out of sheer stubbornness, I followed Susan's instructions, washing unknown children's clothes by hand in the cold night air, leading to severely chapped hands despite using hand cream. "What happened to your hands?" Simon asked with concern, hesitant to share the truth about his mother's outdated superstitions. I eventually told him about Susan's belief that hand-washing children's clothes could lead to pregnancy. Additionally, since Simon also expressed a desire for children, I was worried about speaking ill of his mother. "Actually, your mom has been asking if we have children yet. She told me that hand-washing children's clothes could make it easier to get pregnant, so I've been going to her house every other day to wash them." At this, Simon looked at me with disbelief, as if he couldn't believe what he was hearing. "What? She really thinks that'll work?" Simon pondered for a moment before speaking with a sense of resolve. "I'll talk to Mom, so you don't have to go over there anymore. Actually, Mom said she's going to try living on her own since there's some inheritance from Dad, and she wouldn't cling to her son or grandchildren. And I'm going to see a doctor." "Why the doctor?" "Because pregnancy isn't just about the woman, right? Maybe the problem lies with me. It's better to know," he explained, his reliability shining through. He always considered my troubles as his own. "Thank you, but don't overdo it. It's for you, Rachel. Staying silent while this is happening would be harder," he reassured me. Yet, Susan's behavior didn't change as expected. "I've spoken to Mom. You don't have to visit her house anymore." "Thank you. I'm sorry to make you do this, Simon." "Don't worry about it. Turns out, the difficulty in having kids might be because of me," Simon admitted with a hint of regret. "But the doctor said it should be fine with medication and regular visits. We'll see how it goes, and if nothing changes, we'll think about it again." It seemed like the issue was resolved, but it wasn't over yet. Susan, however, didn't take this well. Despite Simon's efforts to intervene, she sent a package filled with books on pregnancy and a letter expressing her anger, misunderstanding her persistence for concern. The books were about pregnancy and parenting, showing significant signs of wear. Honestly, I harbored mixed feelings of anger and disbelief towards Susan for going this far. When I shared this with Simon, it seemed he felt the same way. "Even though I told her to stop, she's still doing this?" "What should we do with these books? Even if she tells us to read them, honestly." "Mom must be so desperate for a grandchild she's not seeing clearly anymore. I'm really sorry for putting you through this," Simon expressed, choosing his words carefully after some thought. It's undoubtedly a tough spot for him, being caught between me and his mother. "She is my mother, but the person I want to protect the most is my wife, Rachel. If it comes to hurting you carelessly, I'll need to reconsider our relationship with her. But even so, she's still your mother, right? I don't want you to have any regrets if something happens. We might have to attend family functions, but beyond that, we don't need to interact more than necessary. I'm really sorry for not realizing this sooner." "I'm sorry for all this," Simon apologized. Simon and I agreed to minimize contact with Susan, setting boundaries for our peace of mind, acknowledging the stress she was causing. Simon has been sending some money to his mother on his own, but since this is a matter between parent and child, I've decided not to say anything about it this time. He understood my decision to limit interactions with his mother, affirming his priority was our well-being over maintaining unnecessary stress from family expectations. It had been about 10 years since the incident with Susan's problematic behavior. I was leisurely sitting on a bench in the park, enjoying a coffee for the first time in a long while, when I heard a voice from behind. Long time no see. Still childless? You're basically defective for not being able to show off any grandchildren. I didn't recognize who it was at first. But, even though she had gotten much thinner and smaller, it was Susan. It hit me that some people never change, demeaning others as defective right off the bat. Her spiteful gaze made my once warm coffee seem to turn cold and taste bitter, making me realize how much someone's emotions can change their sense of taste. Oh, Susan. Why haven't you shown your face, huh? You haven't been saying unnecessary things to Simon, have you? I never meant anything by it. Susan poked the ground near my feet with her cane and said, "What's the idea behind avoiding your husband's mother to such an extent?" I said as she looked me up and down, oozing sarcasm. Sitting here, drinking your coffee so elegantly in the park, you must feel so good about yourself. She continued, unchanged from the day she demanded I wash a stranger's baby clothes. I had been living peacefully for the last 10 years without running into Susan. I didn't want to see her, but I mustered up the courage and spoke up. "They're right over there." Susan looked momentarily stunned but then burst into laughter. As if the idea of me having a child was the funniest thing. She probably always assumed it was impossible for me. That's why I think she can adopt such an attitude without any qualms. It's her prerogative to believe that happiness comes with having children, but I wish she wouldn't impose her values on others. She then turned serious and glared at me, making me brace for what was coming. "What's this all of a sudden? Aren't you quite a bit older than Simon? No way you could have kids." Certainly, I am older than Simon, but being older doesn't justify the assumption that I can't have children. It's an unfair conclusion, she claimed, ignoring the fact that many couples with age gaps have children all the time. I took a deep breath, ready to speak my mind. "So," when Susan put her finger to my lips to silence me, as if saying I shouldn't say anything more. "You should have just done as I said. Whatever you've told Simon, running away like that. No child would be born to such an accursed person," she declared, her presence imposing. Despite 10 years of estrangement, I felt a genuine threat from her. The thought of being swallowed up by this situation filled me with dread. As I was being lectured by Susan, Anna and Emma came over, looking concerned. "Mom? What's happening? Do you know this person?" "This person is..." I hesitated on how to introduce Susan to Anna and Emma. Despite my bitter memories, she was their grandmother. Was it right to separate them based on my feelings? As I was pondering, Anna and Emma have never met Susan, nor have I ever mentioned her, so they would never imagine that she could be their grandmother. Anna and Emma started whispering among themselves, loud enough for me to hear. "Anna, do you think this person is?" "Yeah, Emma, I think so too. She was here the other day as well," they speculated. Susan, pretending not to notice their whispers, moved closer to Anna and Emma, trying to touch them with trembling hands. The girls looked unsure how to react to this stranger extending her hands to them. "Could it actually be Simon's children? My grandchildren?" Susan moved closer as if it were a touching reunion, despite the girls' clear discomfort at the sudden approach of a stranger they had never met. Then, taking a few steps back, Anna and Emma said to Susan, "You're the nagging grandma from the store, right?" "What do you mean?" "Do you think so too?" "I thought the same." Suddenly, they got excited, and I couldn't follow what was happening. "She's always at the store near our school." "Right. We always see her yelling at the clerks." "What do you mean?" "She's the lady from the store near our school. She's famous for shouting at the clerks, demanding her money back all the time." "Exactly. She only yells at the young people, but when the manager with the name tag is there, she doesn't say anything." I had never heard such stories before, but it was clear she was picking her targets. "It's just that I'm teaching them that they should listen to their elders. I'm doing the right thing." "What?" Anna and Emma looked at me. perhaps thinking I was being unfairly accused by the nagging store grandma. "Mom hasn't done anything wrong. Please stop," they pleaded as Susan pretended not to hear and moved closer. For Susan, this encounter with Anna and Emma might have seemed like a momentous reunion. Tears welling up in her eyes. "Are you really my grandchildren? Well, since we've met, let's have a good look at you. Don't come any closer. If anything happens to Mom, we'll hear this," Emma threatened, brandishing a large, brightly colored personal alarm. Susan seemed to shrink back at the sight of the alarm. Anyone would flinch if threatened with a personal alarm being sounded. It's not often that a grandmother is met with her grandchildren brandishing a personal alarm, treating her like a suspicious person. I instinctively moved to ensure their safety. And Susan began to tremble. What? It must be a shock to be treated like a stranger by the grandchildren she had longed to meet, I thought, seeing her shake. Susan looked significantly diminished in her state of trembling. However, I was more concerned about something else and decided to confront her further. "According to Anna and Emma, you've been demanding refunds at the store? Why is that?" "Because they're pushing useless stuff on me, and it's causing me trouble," Susan responded, her tone suddenly firm, insisting she had done nothing wrong. I decided to ask what Susan would least want to hear. "Are you having financial difficulties? Is that why you can do such embarrassing things in public?" "Embarrassing? Don't say such disrespectful things to your elders," she snapped back, clearly disliking that I had hit a nerve, her bravado faltering. "But normally, it's embarrassing to act so boldly only towards young clerks. To not feel that embarrassment, well, that's just like you, Susan." "Enough! Shut up!" Susan bit back in frustration. Then Anna, with a puzzled expression, said, "This lady always brings out empty containers after eating and yells for a refund." Indeed. Waving around empty containers and shouting was quite an extreme behavior. "What? What do you plan to do with an empty container?" "I don't really know. But they were saying something about a poor old person doing such things." I realized these were the children's words. "Are you perhaps struggling with money?" "Yes. It's terrible to grow old and be in need of money." As far as I can remember, Susan's house was filled with numerous high-end items. She probably spent all of the money from my father-in-law. Living in hardship due to financial trouble must be tough. "If you understand, could you send me a little money? $3,000, no, $2,000 would be enough." I avoided Susan's approaching gaze. "I must decline." "What? After all that you've done, expecting help when you're in trouble is too much." Then, Susan glared at me in frustration. "You really are heartless. To not extend a helping hand to a frail old person like me." She looked at me as if she was entitled to help, as usual. "But there's no need for that. It's all self-inflicted. How pitiful for these children to be raised by a parent like you." Then, Anna and Emma stood in front of me and said to Susan, "We're not pitiful at all. We love our mom, so stop saying mean things. If you say anything more cruel, we'll really go to the police." Susan was speechless at Anna and Emma's sudden retaliation. It must have been shocking for her to be threatened with police by the grandchildren she longed for. "If that's how it is, shall I give you what you currently need?" "Really?" "Of course. Just wait a moment." I ran to a nearby store and bought something. "What's this? Do you think I'm old enough to use this?" I placed adult diapers in front of Susan. The package labeled Comfort Care Diapers was enough to intimidate her. Susan's face turned red with anger. "You made me wash children's clothes until my hands cracked, saying it was practice for when you have children. Don't you remember?" Susan's face became uneasy. After mumbling for a bit, she whispered, "That was for your own good, and I wanted grandchildren quickly. All my friends had them, and I was the only one left out." "So, it's the same for me. For Susan's sake. Wanting grandchildren just because others have them, are you a child?" Susan glared at me resentfully. treating people as old or as children, you'll see karma. It's convenient for you to do as you please, but not others. Then, Simon's voice came from behind. He happened to see us. You're not still harassing Rachel, are you? Harassment? That sounds so harsh. It was just a little. I explained the recent events to Simon. It seems Susan is out of money. She's been causing trouble at the store. Last time I visited, her house was filled with high-end bags and wallets. Simon's usually calm expression turned stern. Mom, wasn't it a lie that you'd live off Dad's inheritance without bothering us? And didn't you promise not to approach Rachel anymore? Well, running into Rachel was just a coincidence. A coincidence? In such a big park, especially a children's park, running into Rachel by chance, who would believe that? Susan fell silent, hit by Simon's accurate guess. You've been hoarding high-end items, still doing that? Well, I just bought bags and shoes to match the places, and they piled up. I've been sending a little money from my allowance, and you were buying bags and wallets to the point they were rolling around? I told you before to only buy what you need. I feel betrayed. Then Susan clung to Simon. It's all a mistake. A lie. What's mistake? A lie? It's clear you're lying, Mom. Don't contact us anymore. And of course, I won't send any money. Simon turned and walked away without looking back at Susan. Susan collapsed on the spot. Rejected by her own son and unable to recover. If you had just had children sooner. If you had them while I could still see. It's not like I had children for Susan. With that, I left with Anna and Emma, hoping never to see her again. I warned Anna and Emma to be careful of Susan when going to school, but it seems they never encountered her again. One day, we got a call from the hospital. Apparently, a few days after our meeting, Susan tripped and fell at a supermarket step. When asked to pick up Susan from the hospital, I found her shrunken figure in the bed, along with the supermarket manager and a police officer. Susan had a bad fall, breaking her leg. It turned out she had been secretly taking items, and the store had been keeping an eye on her. Well, I don't want to hear any excuses. It's embarrassing, so please don't contact me again. It can't be helped. Simon used to send them to me, but now they're gone. I was stunned and speechless. Also, no matter who I ask for your contact information, no one will answer, so I was feeling lonely. I guess so. Apparently, she was trying her best to get in touch with me again. I must have been asking around hoping someone would tell us where we were. Susan has always believed that anyone will listen to what she says. But I had taken precautions in advance. I told everyone about her actions and about the unpleasant experiences I had experienced in the past, and at the same time asked them not to give out my contact information. I didn't want to imagine meeting a selfish person like her again. So, no one gave her our contact information. I heard that some of them were refusing her calls, so she must have been quite disliked even among her friends. Anyone would definitely keep their distance from such a person. I wasn't particularly surprised when I heard that her calls were being rejected. Susan ends up spending every day alone and feeling lonely while in the hospital. It seems that due to the stress, she has been hitting people at the hospital and is being given strict warning. That's fine for now, but I wonder what will happen in the future. The way she continues to run wild without realizing how much she is hated may be considered typical of her. I am spending happy days with Anna, Emma, and my husband. I wondered what would happen when I ran into Susan in the park, but I'm glad I took the plunge. I'm glad I consulted my husband about all the problems. We worked together to receive treatment and were able to meet the two daughters. I also realized that if we don't value others, it will come back to us. Mom, come here. Come on, Mom. Anna and Emma are looking at me with big smiles. I ran over to catch up with them and gave them a big hug. I want to live my life savoring the happiness of being able to spend happy days like this with Anna, Emma, and my husband. Hey, it seems like the baby wants to say something. said my 8-year-old niece, glancing at my son's face. What? That's nonsense. Babies can't talk. My son laughed off what he thought was child's play. But my sister and I were startled and looked at my niece. The grandson blinked his big eyes several times and looked up at me and my sister as if he had something he wanted to convey. It's true, I can hear this child's voice. My niece insisted, tearfully staring at my son as if conveying the baby's words was her mission, even if my son mocked her. My son's wife watched this scene in astonishment. Then what is he saying? I'll listen, just for you. My son said with a condescending look. It wasn't a look one should give a small child. I swallowed hard, watching anxiously for what my niece would say next. My name is Tina. I am 50 years old, living with my husband and our beloved dog, Laura. Until 7 years ago, we lived with my son, Ken, and Laura, but after graduating from community college, Ken started working at a factory and moved out to live on his own. Ken was always rebellious, often not listening to what we said. No matter how much my strict husband warned him, he wouldn't listen, and there were times he got into trouble with the police. Each time, my husband and I would apologize repeatedly, sternly lecturing Ken. But it seemed neither the unpleasant experiences he caused others nor the police warnings bothered Ken, as he repeatedly got into similar troubles. As a child, he was like the neighborhood ringleader, bossing around his elementary school friends, which was still somewhat endearing. As he grew older, his delinquency escalated, causing injuries and troubles to others, leaving us, his parents, at our wits' end. We were worried about him until he graduated from community college. However, upon graduation, he landed a job at a company, and we were overjoyed, thinking Ken had finally turned into a decent person. Becoming a working adult, whether due to being busy or changing his ways, the calls from the police stopped. Living on his own, Ken seemed to have mended his ways. Finally, after years of difficult parenting, my husband and I congratulated each other. 2 years ago, Ken brought home the woman he wanted to marry, Lisa. At that time, Ken, at 25, was on the younger side for marriage, but we never thought the delinquent boy would ever get married, so we were overjoyed at his announcement. This is Lisa, the woman I'm gonna marry. Met her in town. Nice to meet you, I'm Lisa, said the woman Ken brought home, a slender beauty with a modest demeanor, stepping back behind Ken. I'm Tina, Ken's mother. Nice to meet you. Nice to meet you too. It was a mystery why such a lady fell for Ken, but perhaps he had a charming side we hadn't seen. We're planning to get married next month, Ken reported lightly, but his usual confidence meant my husband and I didn't pry. If they had decided together, it wasn't our place to intervene. So, at work the other day, Ken quickly moved on the topic to ramble about his work. Most of it was boasting about how he had saved his workplace from crises or covered for his colleagues' misdemeanors. We half listened, but Lisa attentively nodded along the whole time. Indeed, if a woman listens to this well, it's understandable why Ken fell for her. Despite coming to report their marriage, Ken mostly talked about himself, impressing Lisa. In the end, Ken's marriage announcement turned out to be mostly him rambling on about whatever he wanted to talk about. When Ken went to the restroom, I couldn't help but ask Lisa if she was okay. Are you okay, Lisa? He talks mostly about himself. Oh, I'm used to it, so it's fine. Lisa reassured me, replied like that as if it was nothing. If there's anything, please always feel free to talk to us. We're family now. Thank you. Her eyes were slightly teary, which surprised me. Oh, sorry. Just some dust, Lisa said, wiping the corner of her eye. She might be experiencing the wedding blues. I remembered feeling choked up when I reported my marriage to my in-laws long ago. That day, I watched Lisa leave our house with a nostalgic feeling. To think Ken found such a wife, we can finally relax. Yeah, it's been a long journey, but we made it. We congratulated each other on the upbringing of our son, and that night, we celebrated with some fine wine, getting drunker than usual and going to bed early. 2 years had passed since Ken and Lisa got married, and this year, they had a baby boy. His name is Henry, and from the photos, he looks like Lisa with a well-defined face. The thing is, my husband and I haven't met our grandson yet. Even when we contacted Ken to let us see the grandson, he'd say, "I've been busy lately," or "Lisa doesn't like it," and hardly agreed. Initially, we refrained from visiting right after the birth to not burden Lisa, but after several months without approval from Ken, my husband and I decided to visit Ken and Lisa's home unannounced. It was a sunny Sunday afternoon. Hello. Ken and Lisa lived in a rental property in the countryside, about a 40-minute drive from our house. Lisa opened the door. "It's been a while. How are you?" Seeing Lisa after a long time, she seemed to have a frightened expression for some reason. She appeared thinner than before. Or perhaps more accurately, gaunt. "Sorry for the sudden visit. We just couldn't wait any longer to see our grandson. Is now a good time?" "Oh, yes. Please come in." Despite asking tentatively, thinking it might be a busy time, Lisa readily let us in. As soon as we entered, the smell of cigarettes hit our noses. My husband frowned. I was surprised, thinking, cigarette smell in a house with a baby? But didn't mention it and proceeded to the back of the room. Seeing our grandson sleeping in the baby crib in the living room, our cheeks relaxed. When we gently touched his small hand, he twitched but continued sleeping. "He's adorable." "Thank you," Lisa said with a tired face that slightly brightened. "Is Ken not here today?" "He went out with friends today." "Leaving you and Henry behind?" "It's usual for him." Usual must mean Ken often goes out on his days off. "Is Ken helping with parenting?" "I smelled cigarettes. Is Ken smoking?" Lisa just looked down without answering. Affirming the situation, and I felt very sad. "I'll talk to him. Tell him to help you out more." "Please don't." Hearing her firm refusal, I was taken aback. Despite Lisa being so worn out from childcare and housework, I thought of warning Ken, but perhaps for Lisa, it's unwanted interference? "Oh, no. I appreciate the thought, but he might think I complained." "Oh." Lisa was worried that if I complained to Ken, it would be her who'd be blamed. "But that would be tough on you, Lisa." "I'm fine. So please don't say anything to him." With Lisa insisting so much, neither my husband nor I could say anything more. "All right, but please talk to us if anything comes up. We want to help." "Thank you." Actually, Lisa was raised in a single mother's home, and her mother is currently hospitalized due to illness. So, for Lisa, aside from Ken, my husband and I are the only family she can rely on. We wanted to help Lisa feel a bit more at ease. Afterward, as Lisa sporadically shared about Ken's sloppy lifestyle and his terrible attitude towards her, it pained us to hear. We hadn't known that Ken was being so awful to Lisa while we were not around. Although Lisa refused, we secretly resolved to warn Ken if he continued behaving terribly. A week after my husband and I visited Lisa, on a Saturday when my husband said he had to work, my sister Sarah and my 8-year-old niece Ivy came to visit. Sarah and I have been close since childhood, and even as adults, we often spend time together like this. But this time, it had been a while since we last met, about half a year since I saw my sister, Sarah. Sarah and her daughter, Ivy, came to our house, and first off, they petted our beloved dog, Laura. Ivy, who apparently doesn't usually interact with dogs, looked at Laura with curiosity as Sarah said, "Isn't she adorable?" To which Ivy solemnly nodded. Then, I served tea to Sarah and Ivy, and we caught up on each other's lives. Unlike me, a stay-at-home wife, Sarah works part-time and was venting about her boss. This must be one of the few times she can relieve her stress. I listened to Sarah's stories, nodding appropriately. During this, Ivy, who had been playing with Laura, suddenly turned to us and stared at me with her big eyes. "What's wrong, Ivy?" Then, Ivy started, as if she had something on her mind. "Laura says, thank you for always taking care of me. But she wants more frequent washes, not just once a month but maybe once a week." Really? I was baffled as Ivy began to express Laura's feelings. Looking at Sarah, she was just as surprised, saying, "Well, it's common for young children to pretend to converse with animals," but specifying the frequency of the baths was peculiar. Especially since it was accurate. I've been wanting to give Laura more frequent baths, but I've been too busy lately. Did Laura tell you that, Ivy? Yeah, she looked like she wanted to talk, so I asked her. At first, I thought Ivy was either lying or fantasizing. However, I was taken aback when Sarah mentioned, actually, this kind of thing happens quite often with her. Last time, despite the weather forecast predicting sunshine, she said a storm was coming and it'd be better to stay home. We had no plans that day, so we stayed in, and sure enough, the weather turned severe, just as Ivy said. Signs were even blown away outside. I was glad we didn't go out. Really? And there's more. She found my car keys right away when I lost them and talked with dogs we met while walking, just like now. No one believes it, but I've come to realize this child has a special gift. Sarah continued, patting Ivy's head. If what Sarah said was true, I too had to believe Ivy had some unique ability. Despite finding it unbelievable, witnessing this power firsthand left me no choice but to believe. Ivy, having relayed Laura's feelings, went back to playing with her as usual. And how about you? How have things been lately? Sarah turned to ask me as I recalled last week's events while watching Ivy. Actually, I met my grandson for the first time the other day. I began, sharing everything I saw at Ken and Lisa's house. How Ken left his wife and child at home to hang out alone on Sunday, his smoking habit, and his domineering attitude towards Lisa. With each detail I shared, Sarah's brows furrowed more and more. That's terrible. Ken has always been a handful, but I thought he had gotten better recently. Yes, but it seems I was mistaken. It's just not right for Lisa. Indeed, and worrying. How about we go visit Lisa together next time? Maybe we can help somehow. Of course, we'll let her know beforehand. All right, I'll ask her. The following weekend, Sarah, Ivy, and I visited Ken and Lisa's house again. After notifying Lisa in advance, it turned out Ken was out again, which was just as well. However, I couldn't help but disapprove of Ken leaving his family alone almost every weekend. Hello, Lisa. Sorry for visiting again. It's okay. It's just me and the baby, so any time is fine. Hello. Sarah and Ivy greeted Lisa for the first time in 2 years since we last met as extended family. Ivy rushed over to the crib where my grandson was lying, gently stroking his head. She seemed to like the baby. As we watched Ivy, we sat down at the dining table. Lisa looked even more exhausted from childcare and housework than before, prompting concerned looks from Sarah. Has Ken's behavior changed since then? It hasn't changed. When I try to go out, he yells at me to stay in the house, and he does whatever he wants, like drinking and smoking. If I even slightly resist, he says, "Who do you think is earning the bread for you guys?" Lisa shared, tears brimming in her eyes as she spoke about her daily life. Sarah offered Lisa a handkerchief. Are you okay? I can't believe it. Makes me want to do something about it. I was so angry at Ken's appalling behavior that I couldn't stand it. It would be nice if we could find something on him, something that could get the police involved. Sarah muttered. Hearing this, Lisa gasped. It's not about the police, but lately, we've had debt collectors come to our house. Since my husband wasn't home, I told them they must have the wrong person, but they said, this is Ken's house, right? Really? That happened? It's hard to ask, but Lisa, do you have debts? No, I have no idea about any debts. This house is rented, and we don't have any loans. Sarah and I exchanged looks, wondering what was going on. Was Ken in debt without Lisa knowing, unable to pay it back? While we were swirling with questions and searching for the right words to respond. What a loss today, just my luck. We heard Ken's voice as the front door was roughly opened. Everyone's face froze as we heard Ken's voice. Huh? Why is Mom here? Ken glared at me, reminding me of his rebellious and delinquent days. I'm sorry for intruding unannounced. But I was worried about Lisa. Ken was startled not only by my presence but also by his aunt and cousin being there. However, realizing it was just family, he demanded Lisa to bring him some alcohol. Lisa hurried to the kitchen. There's no more beer left. What? That's your job as a wife to restock. I'm sorry. Ken retorted arrogantly, as if he were a king, and Lisa shrunk in response, apologizing. I couldn't help but shout, Ken, but he didn't even glance at me, just glared at Lisa. Looking for a way to reprimand Ken, the baby in the crib began to cry. Lisa looked startled and started to move towards the baby, but Ken's fierce glare stopped her in her tracks. Sarah and I exchanged looks, trying to communicate silently about what to do next. That's when Ivy spoke up. Hey, the baby seems to have something to say. Ivy said this while glancing at Ken's face. What? That's nonsense. Babies can't talk. Ken laughed off what he thought was just child's play. But Sarah and I turned to look at Ivy's face in astonishment. The grandchild blinked his big eyes several times, looking up at us as if he had something he wanted to say. It's not a lie, I can hear this child's voice. Ivy insisted, undeterred by being ridiculed by Ken. Tears welling up in her eyes as she stared at him. Lisa watched in astonishment. Then what is he saying? I'll listen, just for you. Ken said with a disdainful look that should never be directed at a small child. I watched, holding my breath, as Ivy was about to speak next. Daddy is planning something bad. Mommy, don't be fooled. For a moment, Ken's shoulder twitched at Ivy's words. Lisa looked shocked. Sarah and I immediately understood that Ivy was about to use her mysterious ability again. What do you mean, Ivy? I urged her to elaborate. Ivy took a breath before continuing. Daddy has been writing secrets in a notebook and always hides it behind the bookshelf. Also, I love Mommy. Daddy is scary, and he's crying. Then Ivy walked over to the living room's bookshelf, pulled out a few books, and found a small notebook hidden behind them, handing it to Sarah. Here it is. Seeing the small notebook, Ken's face turned pale. Sarah, gauging the reactions of Ken and Lisa, opened the notebook. This is a life insurance policy. Oh, the insured is Lisa, and Ken is the beneficiary. There's even a contract attached. Now Lisa's face turned pale, and I took the notebook from Sarah to see for myself. As Sarah said, there was a life insurance policy worth over $200,000 taken out on Lisa, and I couldn't believe my eyes. Ken, what's this all about? I never thought my son, who had a history of delinquency, could do something so cruel to his own wife. I glared at him, wanting to confront him about this life insurance right away. Damn, I had no choice. I ran out of money. Besides, anyone would get life insurance, right? It's not like I was planning to do anything to Lisa. Ken rattled off excuses as if trying to justify himself. The fact he mentioned not having money was corroborated by the debt story I heard from Lisa. It was clear where the money had gone, considering how he leaves his wife and child to hang out every day. Probably wasted it on some frivolous activities. Insurance is usually something you get for yourself, right? Taking out a life insurance policy on Lisa without her knowing and acting ignorant about it is just wrong. My logical point left Ken at a loss for words. Then, Ivy spoke up again, adding fuel to the fire. The baby told me. Daddy's been mumbling to himself that he got fired from his job for stealing money from the company. And he's planning to do something bad to Mommy to get money. What? I exclaimed, shocked by her words. Fired from his job? Then what had he been doing all this time during weekdays? Lisa, too, stared at Ken in disbelief. What are you talking about? You don't have any proof. Ken spat back at Ivy. I stepped in front of Ivy, unleashing all the anger I had been holding back. Proof? Ivy just told you everything. She can understand the baby's words, not just that. Finding this notebook wasn't a coincidence either. What Ivy says is true. You've seen the life insurance policy with your own eyes. Stop making excuses and apologize to Lisa. I scolded Ken more fiercely than ever. Heartbroken to know my son could attempt such a terrible thing against his wife. Ken, who had boasted about covering for his subordinates' misconduct, was actually the one causing trouble. It was disheartening and made me feel nauseous to think my own son could sink so low. What the hell? Ken ruffled his hair, twisting his face in frustration. But it was all his own doing. No one felt sympathy for him. After I scolded Ken, Lisa seemed to gather some courage and finally spoke up. I never imagined you could do something so despicable. I want nothing to do with you anymore. Pay back the debt yourself. Goodbye. With those words, Lisa took the baby and stormed out of the house. We watched in astonishment. Ken muttered complaints after Lisa left, but after being rebuked by Sarah and me, he ended up sulking. Though it was unexpected for Lisa to leave, I was glad we could expose Ken's wrongdoing. Looking at Ivy, who seemed content after speaking her mind, she stretched and said, I'm hungry. Shall we go get something to eat? Well, we'll be taking our leave now. With that, Sarah, Ivy, and I left Ken's house behind. A place that could be visited by debt collectors at any moment. I decided never to return to this house again, not just for Lisa's sake. Why the hell? Ken was still shouting until we closed the door, but we ignored his pathetic cries and left the building. A few days later, worried about Lisa, I contacted her. I'm sorry to have worried you. I've gone back to my grandmother's house. Please feel free to visit Henry anytime, she assured me, which relieved me. Lisa had sent Ken divorce papers right after that incident. Ken was reluctant to agree to the divorce at first, but after Lisa insisted she would not let him see the child unless they divorced, he finally gave in, and the divorce was settled. Lisa, whose mother is hospitalized, said she's back at her grandparents' seeking employment and plans to place Henry in daycare soon. Ken's miserable days began, forced to work part-time daily to repay his debts. Initially, he begged my husband for money, but after hearing the full story, my husband was furious and told him, don't ever come back home. Thankfully, that meant Ken no longer sought help from us. I don't feel sorry for him. He brought this upon himself. Now, I occasionally visit Lisa and her grandparents' house to play with Henry. Despite everything that happened because of Ken, Lisa and her family have warmly welcomed Sarah, Ivy, and me. Ivy, do you know what Henry just said? Yeah. I'm happy I can play with Mommy and Grandma. Really? That's great. Lisa was just oppressed by Ken. She's actually a kind and polite, wonderful person. That's why she still treats us without any discrimination. For me, that was enough. In the early afternoon on a weekday, feeling unwell, I brought my daughter back home and noticed something odd upon arrival. There shouldn't have been anyone at home, yet my husband's car was parked outside for some reason. Didn't Dad say he was gonna drive to the ceremony? That day, my husband was supposed to have left early in the morning to attend a relative's wedding by car. Feeling my heartbeat quicken, I said, let's just go inside for now, and quietly entered the house. Then, from the bedroom on the second floor, I could hear some noises. With a sinking feeling, I approached the bedroom. The bedroom door was slightly open, allowing me to sneak a peek inside, even though it was dim. When I stealthily looked inside, I was met with an unbelievable scene. What? I couldn't help but let out a sound. My daughter also peeks inside from behind me, and then, with a eek, she closes her eyes and steps back. In the bed was my husband. And a familiar woman. The figure of my mother-in-law, my husband's mother. Yes, what was unfolding before me and my daughter was the scene of their infidelity. My husband, who had always been kind to both me and my daughter. The mother-in-law who was easy to talk to and helped with raising our child. Beautiful memories shatter loudly, like fragile glass breaking into pieces. What? This is disgusting. Absolutely not. Horrible. Mom, over here. My daughter quietly tugged at my hand, urging me to step back from the scene. Tears were welling up in her eyes, seemingly about to cry at the worst sight imaginable. I too was stunned, my mind going blank, unable to move. But how could I forgive these two for such betrayal? I decided to contact someone. My name is Samantha, 45 years old. I live with Ken, who is 5 years younger than me, and our daughter, Madison, a freshman in college. Ken and I met through a friend, and it didn't take long for us to start dating. After about a year, we began living together. Our relationship progressed smoothly, and soon, Ken proposed to me at a restaurant with a beautiful night view, and we decided to get married. The first time I met Ken's parents during the marriage introduction, I thought they seemed very classy and kind. However, what caught my attention was how young Ken's mother, Minnie, appeared. She looked incredibly youthful and beautiful, not matching her age. I married Ken when I was about 25. Usually, parents around this time are about 50 years old. But no matter how you looked at it, Ken's mom didn't seem to be around 50. She was slim and very beautiful. Seeing my confusion, Ken explained from behind, "My parents remarried when I was in middle school. My dad was 49, and my stepmom was 37 then. It was one of those age gap marriages." That made sense to me. When Dad brought Mom home saying he wanted to remarry when I was in 5th grade, I was shocked by her youth and had a mixed feelings. Yeah, it would be surprising to have such a beautiful person as your new mom. Well, but Dad seemed happy, so I was happy too, and now I'm glad she became part of the family, he said with a gentle smile. I had never heard much about Ken's past, so getting to know more about him as we were getting married felt good. Minnie was easy to talk to, perhaps because of her youth. "Did Ken propose properly?" she asked with a grin. "Yes, at a fancy restaurant with a beautiful night view." "Wow, that's lovely. And? What do you like about Ken?" "Well, I guess it's his kindness. Also, he notices little things like if I change my makeup." Minnie was so easy to talk to that I found myself gushing without realizing. "Ah, Ken's got good points, huh?" Minnie said, nudging Ken with her elbow. "Come on, Mom, stop it." "That's embarrassing," Ken said, blushing but looking pleased. Though not related by blood, it was clear the in-laws really got along well. When my husband introduced me to his in-laws, he said this. "When Dad first brought Mom over, I was going through puberty, so it was a bit complicated. But more than that, I was happy. I had been lonely since I was a child, without siblings or a mother. But when Mom became part of the family, our home felt brighter. I realized then that you don't have to be blood related to be a real family. That's why I want to build a happy and close family with Samantha, just like Dad and Mom. I want us to become a true family." My husband said that and held my hand. Ken. I felt as if I saw his commitment to our marriage. He had overcome loneliness with his family. I resolved in my heart to cherish Ken and to become a family like his parents. When I introduced Ken to my parents, they quickly became friendly thanks to his inherent brightness. My parents warmly accepted him, and we were blessed by many relatives and friends at our wedding. Soon after, we were blessed with a child. "Really? I'm gonna be a dad?" Ken was surprised, but beamed with joy at the news of my pregnancy. The in-laws felt the same, truly celebrating my pregnancy. After a while, we found out the sex of the baby, and learned that it was a girl. "A girl, huh? I'm gonna be worried all the time." "Ken, you're likely to be super protective. Man, if she ever brings home a boyfriend, I might just die of loneliness." "If you say that, she might end up hating you." Even before she was born, we would laugh together. Those times were truly happy. Since getting pregnant, he has been working even harder at his job and has been more proactive than ever in helping around the house. Sorry for making you cook dinner after just getting back from work. When my morning sickness was bad, he would even cook after coming home late from work. He says, "What are you talking about? Men can only stand by and watch, so let me at least do this." He also took care of me by bringing a blanket when he thought I might be cold, saying, "Hey, don't chill yourself," and insisting on carrying heavy items. "Give me that bag, I'll carry it." Even when I said, "I'm fine," he would insist, "No, give it here," and always took the initiative to help me. Thanks to my husband, both the baby and I were doing well. One day, I got a call from my mother. "Aren't you planning on coming home for the birth?" I hadn't really thought about it. It's your first birth, so there must be a lot of worries, right? You can come home for a while if you want. Really? Is that okay? Of course. You should lean on us at times like this. Grateful for my mother's kind words, I thanked her and replied, "Thank you. I'll talk to Ken about it." Nowadays, about half of all expectant mothers go back to their parental home before and after giving birth. Honestly, there were many things I didn't know and was anxious about with this being my first birth, so my mother's suggestion was very welcome. "I'll discuss it with Ken." After hanging up with my mom and waiting a bit, I brought it up with Ken when he returned from work. My mom called today and asked if I'm considering going back home to give birth. I'm all for it. What do you want to do, Samantha? Well, to be honest, it would be reassuring to have my mom, who has experience in child-rearing, around. Yeah, that sounds good. My company doesn't offer paternity leave, and it would be a relief for me too if there's someone reliable near you in case something happens. If you want to go back home, I support it. Thank you. Then it's decided. Ken respected my wishes and was supportive of me going back home. And so, I was able to welcome the birthday without any problems. I named my daughter Madison, hoping she would grow up to value the connections between people and to be kind and considerate. After giving birth, I went back to my parents' house and spent some time there with my parents and daughter. The house will be left empty for a while, but considering my husband is good at household chores, I doubt I'll come back to find the house in a mess after being away for some time. He could manage to cook simple meals by himself, so I didn't have to worry about his brief stint living alone. On weekends, the three of us, Madison, Ken, and I, would live together. "I can change diapers now, I've practiced," he'd say, managing it perfectly as if he'd been practicing at home. Seeing him taking care of me and Madison even when I was not around made me smile naturally. Every day I felt grateful for having married such a wonderful person, both as a husband and as a father. When I returned home after the birth, the house was not at all messy and was kept in a clean state, just as I expected. Moreover, there was a new baby crib that I had wanted, along with a lot of diapers, toys, and clothes for the baby. "What's all this? Did you buy all this?" Pretty good, right? Actually, my dad and mom bought these as a gift for the baby. Really? That's so kind. I'll send them a thank you message later. Oh, do that. Mom even said cooking might be hard for you after work, so she cooked and brought over a bunch of frozen meals. She's really a worrier, isn't she? It seems that my mother-in-law had visited several times while I was away. She is amazing. I have a lot to learn from her. It's just that my mom is too incredible. He was laughing in amazement. Ken has always been one to heap praise on his mother. From the outside, one might think he's a bit of a mama's boy, as he often talks about his mother. He would say things like, "For her age, Mom is really beautiful," or "The meals Mom makes are out of this world," and at the beginning of our marriage, it bothered me a bit, but he never said I should be like his mother. Above all, Ken is very kind to me, calling me cute and praising my cooking as the best. So, I tried not to dwell on it too much. Thanks to my in-laws and husband, both my daughter and I were able to live comfortably and happily every day. Eventually, my maternity leave ended, and it was time for me to return to work for the first time in a while, leaving my daughter at preschool. However, a week before returning, my boss informed me, "Samantha, I'm sorry, but you've been transferred to a different department starting next week. During my maternity leave, it seems they were short-staffed and hired someone new. I had been told before going on maternity leave that returning to the same department is not guaranteed, so I understand that it can't be helped. Honestly, I'm quite anxious, but living on just Ken's salary is not enough, so becoming a stay-at-home mom is not an option. I'm feeling down, but I have to psyche myself up and give it my all. Then came the first day back. The facilities and atmosphere had changed since I was last at work, and I found myself bewildered. Above all, having been transferred to a different department after such a long break, the work was completely different, and I was struggling just to keep up with everyone every day. I felt deeply how challenging it is to juggle childcare and work. I wonder if I can really manage both work and childcare from now on. As these days continued, I found myself expressing my concerns to Ken. He seemed a bit surprised since I usually don't make such downhearted remarks. It's okay. You're just confused because of the new job and unfamiliar childcare. It'll settle down eventually. Cheer up, he said while patting my head, but I remained downcast. Then Ken suggested, what if we ask my mom for help with childcare? Your mom? Yeah, my mom. She's never raised children and really wants to be more involved with the baby. Is that so? Yes. She'd be thrilled to spend time with the baby, and it might help you relax a bit, right? Just knowing someone nearby is willing to help can make a big difference. What do you think? If Minnie is really willing to help, it would be more than I could ask for. Is it really okay to rely on her so much? It's fine. In fact, she'll be happy. Saying this, Ken took out his smartphone and stepped out of the living room. After a while, he came back and gave me a peace sign, indicating she's happy to help. It seems he had already discussed it with Minnie. From then on, Minnie started to visit our house more frequently and, being a stay-at-home mom herself, actively helped with childcare. Some days, I'd come home from work to find that Minnie had cooked dinner or had picked up Madison from preschool. She also said, Ken and I can watch Madison, so feel free to go back to your parents' house and relax without the child occasionally, and she and Ken's dad would sometimes take Madison out, really spoiling us. With Minnie's full support, we somehow managed to raise our daughter. Time flew by, and Madison turned 17. Becoming a lawyer has been Madison's dream since she was young. To achieve her dream, her goal seems to be attending a prestigious university, and she has been very busy lately with tutoring and extra classes. During this time, we received a wedding invitation from father-in-law's sister's granddaughter, Emily. Emily, huh? It's been a while. Have you met her, Samantha? I met her briefly when we went to your parents' house for Christmas. Right, not much acquaintance there. The whole family is invited, but do you think we can attend that day? I'm fine. I can take a day off work. But I wonder about Madison. Well, it's a crucial time for her. Yeah. Then, maybe I should go alone this time. It's a shame after they invited all of us, but is that okay? It's fine. Everyone will understand. We can't leave Madison at home alone. You're right, thank you. How are you getting to the venue? The wedding venue for Emily seems to be a stylish place with a forest atmosphere, judging from the photos on the invitation. It's a lovely place, but it seems a bit hard to reach by train. Well, I won't be able to drink, but maybe I should drive. That seems like the best idea. Be careful. With my husband's suggestion, prioritizing our daughter, Madison and I will be absent, and only Ken will attend Emily's wedding. On the day of the wedding, Ken was dressed in his suit, his hair perfectly styled. Wow, Dad, looking sharp. Make sure to send photos from the wedding, okay? Right? Oh, I'll send them. Keep up with your studies, Madison. Take care. With that, my husband headed off to the wedding venue. A while later, after sending Madison off to school, I went to work. I thought it was going to be just another regular day, but around lunchtime, I got a call from the school saying, Madison seems to be feeling very unwell. Worried it might be the flu going around, I left work early in a panic to pick her up. I arrived at the school, put her in the car, and we headed straight to the hospital for a checkup, and fortunately, it wasn't the flu but likely just fatigue from the change of seasons. Both she and I were relieved, and I bought some easy-to-eat porridge and jelly for her before heading home. Once home, I noticed something odd. Ken's car, which shouldn't have been there, was parked in the driveway. Huh? Why is his car here? He was supposed to go by car, wasn't he? And I had seen him off this morning as he got into the car. Could he have forgotten something? But we checked last night that he had the wedding gift in his bag. What else could be so important that he had to come back for? Madison also noticed the car and asked, "Huh? Didn't Dad go by car today? Is he home?" tilting her head. Trying not to let my turmoil show, I replied, maybe he ended up taking the train after all. While we both found it strange, we cautiously opened the front door. As we entered, my heart skipped a beat in dread. Lined up next to Ken's shoes were a pair of women's shoes that I had never seen before. It was clear they weren't mine. A terrible suspicion began to swell inside me, and I could feel my heart racing faster than usual. What? Why? Is someone here? Why? We looked at each other. No, it can't be. Madison seemed to share my dread, and we stood there, stunned. Let's go in slowly. Though puzzled, Madison followed my lead, careful to make no noise. And so, we quietly entered the house. Even as we stepped into the living room, there was no sign of anyone. See, Dad's not here after all. I'm going back to my room. When my daughter was about to go back to her room, I called out, "Wait a minute, want to go up together?" I was unable to shake off the uneasy feeling despite her wanting to go up alone. Thus, we went upstairs together. But halfway up, we noticed something amiss. Isn't the light in Mom and Dad's bedroom on? I was sure I had turned off all the lights before heading out this morning. I thought I turned it off. Wait, Mom, do you hear that? Indeed, there was a faint sound, barely audible. It seemed to be coming from our bedroom. I walked ahead, filled with dread, and approached the bedroom. The door was slightly ajar, allowing us to glimpse inside the dimly lit room. Peering in stealthily, we were confronted with an unbelievable scene. What? I couldn't help but let out a sound. My daughter, peeking from behind me, screamed, "No!" Inside, there were my mother-in-law and husband who should have been attending Emily's wedding. Furthermore, anyone could see they were blatantly engaged in an affair, completely naked. Witnessing such a scene, my daughter said ugh and, covering her mouth, started to retch as she backed away. Why? It's so gross, I can't handle this. This is horrible. Mom, over here. In a whisper, Madison tried to pull me away from the spot. Tears filled her eyes, about to cry at the horrible sight. I was in the same state. My mind went blank, and I stood there, dazed, unable to move. Madison repeatedly tugged at my hand, calling out, "Mom." How could I have not noticed before? My always kind husband. The husband who perfectly managed household chores and childcare. My beloved husband. As both Madison's father and my spouse, I believed he was the ideal man without a doubt. Madison felt the same way. She respected her gentle father. Today, she even complimented him, saying, "You look cool," as we saw him off together. I regret exposing my daughter to such a horrendous scene. Both Madison and I loved my husband and Minnie. Yet, in an instant, our happiness crumbled. Since the beginning of our marriage, my husband always looked at Minnie with kind eyes. He would frequently invite her over, and she was even visiting our home during my pregnancy. He also excessively praised her. It would be a lie to say I never found it strange. But I believed there was a genuine parent-child love between them, even if they weren't biologically related. I trusted them. But the love between my husband and Minnie was not of a normal parent and child, but as lovers. As I was standing dazed in my daughter's room, she said, "Mom, we can't just stand by. We need to take action. I have an idea, and she went back towards the bedroom. Then she pulled out her smartphone and started recording a video of the two, caught in the act.
What are you doing filming that?
I tried to stop her in a panic, but Madison insisted, we have to. We need solid evidence so those two can't deny anything, and continued filming. She seemed disgusted, closing her eyes to avoid the sight but kept recording to gather evidence.
Madison, are you okay?
I was concerned about her since she was feeling unwell earlier, but she said, I'm fine now, the adrenaline is kicking in. The evidence comes first, seemingly forgetting her ailment. Despite Madison and I whispering among ourselves, the two of them didn't notice at all. They must be so engrossed in each other that they've become oblivious to their surroundings. After a while of capturing evidence, Madison and I began to calm down somewhat. How should we confront them? Just then, from the bedroom, I heard my husband suggestively saying, Mama, let's take a bath together.
Madison, they're coming out of the bedroom. This is bad.
Madison and I quickly hid in her room. Ew, he's calling her Mama? Gross, Madison muttered under her breath. What should we do in this situation? Should we confront my husband and Minnie with the video evidence, threatening to expose them? No, emotions would likely get in the way, and we wouldn't be able to have a rational discussion. Besides, Madison and I alone might not be able to stand up to them. Then, I had a plan. As soon as Minnie and my husband entered the bathroom, I threw all their clothes into the trash can. About 30 minutes later, the doorbell rang. Come in, I beckoned the guests into the living room. Hearing the commotion outside, my husband and Minnie came out of the bathroom, opening the door to the changing area.
Why are you?
Our home's layout has the bathroom adjacent to the living room, separated by a door. In the living room, next to it, were Madison, me, and the father-in-law, along with other relatives all gathered. My husband panicked, trying to cover himself. What's going on? Why are you dressed like that? Seeing my smiling face, my husband was startled. Oh, the wedding ended early, so I was taking a bath, but I forgot to bring a change of clothes. Despite not attending the wedding, you had the nerve to lie about it right in front of those who are there, and it was a lie that got found out almost immediately. Oh, Ken. You weren't at the wedding, were ya? No, Sure enough, my husband got called out by his father and stumbled over his words. Your mother is inside too, right? Can you tell her to come out before she catches a cold? I pointed out, and he stumbled again, my mom is, well. Seeing Ken unable to answer anything, his father snapped.
Hey! You, come out too!
Saying this, he pushed Ken and went into the changing room, pulling out his mother by the hand.
No!
Eventually, dragged out forcibly by his father, my mother-in-law also appeared in front of all the relatives, covering her private parts just like Ken. Dad, Grandma, it's gross, so get dressed quickly. My daughter said calmly and threw clothes at them. For a while, the two who had been hiding in the changing room, shivering with lips blue from cold, hurried to put their clothes on. Once dressed, my father-in-law spoke up.
Can you explain to me why the two of you were in there together?
He questioned my husband and my mother-in-law, his face turning red as if it were about to burst into flames. I was feeling unwell, and Ken was just helping me. My mother-in-law started with an excuse that made no sense.
And how do you explain this?
With those words from my father-in-law, all the relatives started to play a video showing Ken and my mother-in-law together. How did you? What is this? When did this happen? Their faces turned pale instantly. In fact, after recording my husband and mother-in-law, I had sent the video to my father-in-law on his way back from the wedding, with a message saying here's the proof. It seems that after seeing the video, my father-in-law shared it with the relatives he was with, telling them, check this out. Thus, like a family gathering, everyone ended up at our house. Normally, my father-in-law is a calm person and doesn't involve others, but he couldn't remain calm after they skipped a family wedding and committed such betrayal.
Can you still say you didn't betray us?
that you don't know anything about this." Such harsh words, unlike my usually gentle father-in-law, filled the house. Following my father-in-law, other relatives also started hurling insults like, "You have a daughter and yet you do this, unbelievable as a parent, disgusting." And then I said to Ken, "Let's get a divorce." The divorce was already agreed upon by our daughter. After seeing something so disgusting, "I can't stay with Dad and Grandma, they're just too gross," she agreed vehemently with me. Even my father-in-law said, "Minnie, let's get a divorce." And Ken, from today onwards, we're no longer father and son. Well, seeing something like that, it's understandable. The word divorce coming from both me and my father-in-law clearly shook my husband and mother-in-law, who, not knowing what else to do, suddenly knelt down. "I'm sorry, I'm really sorry. I won't do it again. Please, forgive me. Please." No matter how much they begged on their knees, our anger wasn't going to subside. I just said, "Get out of this house right now." They kept apologizing, but I refused to listen. In the end, my father-in-law grabbed Ken and my mother-in-law by the hands and said, "Think about Madison. Just leave, now," and threw them out. And then, as if following suit, the relatives dispersed. "Samantha, let's talk again sometime," my father-in-law said as he too left the house. Overwhelmed by everything that had happened, my daughter and I just sat down on the floor, exhausted. "Mom, are you okay?" "I'm here for you," she said, patting my shoulder. But despite her brave front, tears were streaming down her face. "Madison, I'm okay because I have you. And you have me, Madison. From now on, it's just the two of us," I told her. I felt pathetic for always being the one supported by my daughter, but I resolved to make sure she would not feel lonely from now on. And a few days later, our divorce was finalized. At the same time, my father-in-law and mother-in-law also finalized their divorce. Ken kept apologizing and asking for forgiveness, but I consistently said impossible, and he seemed to have finally given up. With the help of a lawyer, I received alimony from both my ex-husband and ex-mother-in-law. The video my daughter had suggested turned out to be really useful. It seems my father-in-law also received alimony from Ken and my ex-mother-in-law, but he wanted me to have all of it. "This is yours, not mine." "I've already received mine." "No, please, take it." I failed as a father and as Minnie's husband. I believe I also had a part in this situation. "At least let me do this much for Madison and you," he insisted. Out of respect for his wishes, I accepted it and used it for my daughter's education. Honestly, the thought of financing my daughter's law school by myself was daunting, so I'm truly grateful to my father-in-law. And now, 10 years have passed. Madison has fulfilled her dream and become a lawyer. She's still new to the field but wants to use her knowledge to help those in need. She will face many challenges. But knowing Madison and her strong heart, she's bound to successfully overcome them and become a respectable lawyer. Since the incident, my ex-mother-in-law has been living alone in a shabby apartment. Having been a homemaker for many years, she had no job prospects and ended up working part-time at a grocery store. I don't know if she's managing well, but she must be struggling. As for Ken, it seems his relationship with his stepmom is truly over. After our respective divorces, they hardly met anymore. Perhaps they were only enjoying the thrill of the affair. As for my ex-husband, he has been completely ostracized by my father-in-law and treated like an outcast by the relatives since that day. Moreover, his company never paid well. After paying alimony to my father-in-law and me, he must be living a tight life. He did care deeply for Madison, but she told him, "I never want to see your face again," leaving him in tears. Since then, Madison and my ex-husband have not seen each other. Well, he got what he deserved. My father-in-law and I still keep in touch occasionally. He is also supportive of Madison's future. As for me, since my daughter has now become a working adult, my parenting has taken a back seat. Lately, my hobby has been traveling with my high school friend, Susan, who, just like me, got divorced after her husband had an affair and is now single. "We're getting older and I'm done with love. But creating new memories with friends, my daughter, and my father-in-law is something I look forward to.